Well, let's cross to DC now and speak to Julia Manchester, who's with The Hill magazine, which comes from the capital. And we'll also be speaking to Peter Chowka, who's a veteran political analyst and contributor to AmericanThinker.com. Julia, first of all, just take us through the 4 charges.
Yeah, good morning. So these 4 charges are essentially on conspiracy and obstruction, including defrauding the United States. They're not directly related to the actual physical storming of the Capitol, but they're essentially related to misleading the American people when it comes to the 2020 election results. They, accuse President Trump of misleading and essentially, knowingly misleading the American people. So, this isn't, Trump, being tricked into this. It's Trump knowingly did this, according to these charges. That's where some of the criticism has come from Republicans and those on the conservative side of the aisle, because they've looked at this and they've seen, Jack Smith, the lead prosecutor in this, talk about the storming of the Capitol and sort of draw that link. But Republicans say there's nothing in the actual 45-page indictment about the storming of the Capitol. So it's about Trump's state of mind and his motivation and trying to stay in power and overturning the 2020 election results.
Peter, what will be the prosecution's central case here? Will it be that they will try and prove that Trump knew he'd lost the election?
Yes. Well, in fact, we have a statement by Trump's attorney, John Lauro, yesterday, who claimed that Trump's strategy is going to be to claim that these false allegations they claim of widespread election fraud were protected speech under the First Amendment. And Donald Trump may try to pin the blame on his lawyers for advising him in ways he could stay in power after losing the contest to President Joe Biden. And of course, it comes up against a free speech battle as well. The defenders of President Trump, and they include some Democrats like the esteemed Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz and Harvey Silverglate, who is a civil liberties, civil rights lawyer in Boston. They are both saying that this prosecution is against the Constitution of the United States because it prohibits the President Trump's exercise of free speech. So it's going to be up to the prosecution in this case, the one filed this week, to overcome that defense. But as we know, in the United States, a defendant is innocent until proven guilty. I wish the mainstream media could recognize that here, quite frankly. But it's going to be an unprecedented and fascinating period of time ahead in American politics.
So, Peter, when we talk about free speech, that's free speech, including the freedom to lie, as people would see it.
Well, you have nowhere other to look than at President Biden. I mean, excuse me. It's now pretty clear that President Biden has lied repeatedly by saying he never discussed anything about his son Hunter Biden's collusion and business with foreign powers, which is basically illegal influence peddling. And it's come out in testimony this past week or two, and in congressional hearings, congressional sworn testimony, as well as evidence from emails and text messages that this is not the case. So if lying in politics is suddenly a crime that will land you in jail, then pretty much every politician, quite frankly, is going to be guilty of that.
It's interesting how quickly we've deflected to President Biden. I mean, that is Trump's strategy with his base, with his supporters, but that strategy is not going to work in court.
Well, that you may have a very good point there, but may I simply point out that in a recent poll this past week, 58% of Americans, including 24% of Democrats, think that the Biden Department of Justice has not been fair in its treatment of President Trump. And this is according to Mark Penn, President Clinton's former pollster, who said this on Fox News yesterday, Friday, at 9:20 Eastern Time. And he also said, and I quote, "Half of Americans don't know about the reports of Biden corruption and the two-tier justice system because the media is simply not reporting it. So it's not only President Trump's base, which of course is going to follow him off the next cliff if necessary, but it's many civil libertarians, constitutional scholars, and even Democrats who are, shall we say, defending President Trump against some, if not all, of these charges.
Julia, is this going to be the problem, actually, for President Biden, that Trump and his supporters are always trying to turn this around and to say, but what about President Biden? Is that strategy going to be successful? And how does President Biden defend himself against that?
Yeah, look, in terms of the strategy being successful, we'll have to see how it plays out. It's certainly successful with Republican primary voters because you see other Republican candidates running for president, like Ron DeSantis, for example, the closest person Donald Trump has to a rival in this primary, sort of echoing that sentiment, saying clearly there was a double standard in how President Biden's son Hunter was treated versus how President Trump was treated in this, and that this is a political bias from the Department of Justice. However, I think, it's a headache for the White House. The White House doesn't want to be, asked about Hunter Biden and asked about, whether Hunter Biden, gave his father, was trying to essentially peddle his father's influence with his business partners, or, talk about Hunter Biden's, charges he faces in a legal sense related to, drug-related crimes or, possession of a firearm. The White House wants to be talking about the economy and how the economy in the U.S. and, according to some indicators, is getting better. They want to be talking about those kitchen table issues, but instead they're constantly being asked in the media about Hunter Biden, and they're slowly starting to sort of change their responses to it, saying, they had, the president, was not aware of his son's business dealings, to we're not talking about his son's business dealings. It's just not a good look for the White House.
And Julia, it won't just be the White House that want this over and done with quickly. Prosecutors will be keen to get this over with before the election. Why is that so important to them?
Well, look, I think they want to get this out of the way because, they don't want these two, this case happening in tandem with, all of Trump's legal issues. They want to be able to, get all of these cases settled and out of the way so it's not a headache, going into the election. Whether that happens, we'll see on the Trump side of things. That team is already trying to delay with the January 6th case, trying to delay and even move to a different jurisdiction outside of D.C., which they say is politically biased against Trump. But we'll see if that happens. This likely will happen, though, before the election.
Peter, if President Trump were to end up in jail, technically he can still be president, but would that work in practice, do you think?
Well, the Washington Post had an article yesterday, I believe, saying that because of the Secret Service protection of him and his family for life, that might actually negate the possibility of him being sentenced to jail because it wouldn't work according to how they have to protect him. But I'd like to make another brief point about the public opinion polls right now. Certainly, President Trump, former President Trump right now, is way ahead of his Republican opposition. The New York Times poll yesterday of the Iowa caucus next January, the first test in the primaries, has him 24 points ahead of Ron DeSantis, and then everybody else, the other 12 candidates, is way down from there. The Real Clear Politics average of polls for the general election, however, has Trump and Biden versus neck and neck. Trump 44%, Biden 44%. 0.9. However, and this is very significant, a Reuters Ipsos poll on August 3rd found that almost half of the Republicans, 45%, who support President Trump now, would not vote for him if he is convicted of a felony by a jury before the election. So it would seem that his only hope politically and perhaps legally as well is to put off these court proceedings until he could possibly be elected president, and then the charges would go away because you can't charge a sitting president, and or he might be able to pardon himself. But as a final comment on this area here, the future is totally unknown. We are in completely new territory here in the 234 years of the American constitutional representative government. A former president has never been criminally charged, and no one can really predict where this is going now. And it's very unfortunate because the country is so divided, and many people on the right, certainly, and even some on the left are saying this is going to only enhance and worsen that division in the months ahead. So it's really sad times.
Okay, Peter Chowka, a veteran political analyst and contributor to AmericanThinker.com, and Julia Manchester with The Hill magazine.